Today we'll talk about pineapple in your breast milk. We'll discuss what baby showers do to relationships, and we'll settle a debate about kids being forced to hug their grandparents and more. So this thread starts with, help, I ate pineapple. And if you're anything like me, you probably already think this is one of the most ridiculous things you've ever read. But let's read the question. So this may be a dumb question, but how long will certain foods affect or remain in your breast milk? Ironically, she finds a different thing dumb about the question than what I would have assumed, but that question is a pretty fair one. My 5-week-old just got over a pretty gnarly diaper rash, and it didn't dawn on me until this evening when I read somewhere that I should be avoiding citrus or acidic fruit while breastfeeding. I'm connecting the dots now and thinking her rash could have been from pineapple that I ate last week. Now I'm worried because I had pineapple again this afternoon without realizing that it could be bad for my baby. So my question is, how long will it be in my system? Because I'd like to pump and dump and offer her milk from my frozen stash until it's safe for her to have fresh breast milk again. Does anyone have any insight? Thanks. Now, the sad thing about this is that it's actually coming from the right place. So it's probably good to consider what you're eating and what types of things you're eating and how these foods manifest themselves or come out in your breast milk. Because it is true that the things that you eat as a breastfeeding mother will or can have some kind of impact on your baby. And so the actual impetus, or what's causing this question, what's making her ask this is a good one. She's coming at it from the right place. Unfortunately for her, I guess, I don't know what she read or where she came across this, but pineapple does not cause a diaper rash, and citrus or acidic fruit in general would be a very, very, very big amount of things that people should be avoiding if they're breastfeeding. So I'm pretty sure everyone would know about it if that had been a thing. Now, thankfully, also, so that you don't lose your faith in humanity, pretty much everyone in the comments also said, I've never heard of that, and it's not a thing. You can eat pineapple without any problems. There are some other allergens that babies might be a little bit more sensitive to, things like dairy and maybe caffeine and so on, that are a bit more intense on your system and on your gut, but not pineapple. The next one, am I a bitch? Which is probably one of my favorite genres of threads that exist online. So here she says, I had my baby shower last month and it just had me thinking like crazy ever since then. The only family I have that I talk to are my sisters and my father, and they bought me the most gifts at the baby shower, stuff I actually needed and things for my registry. And on my boyfriend's side, his family only bought us clothes or nothing at all. Is it rude that when the 1-year birthday comes around, I don't even want the people who brought nothing to show up to the party? His friends even bought us stuff from the registry that we needed. Now, this is really amusing to me because baby showers are actually an American invention. And yes, a bunch of other countries might do something similar. They might have a party to celebrate having a baby. But this idea of having a whole registry of items that you need to buy and then expecting people who show up to your baby shower, baby party, whatever method you use for it, to buy those items for you is a very materialistic, very consumerist way of handling having babies in general. And what really boggles my mind about this one is that a lot of the people in the comments say, no, I don't think you're wrong at all. Clothes only, as if you have an entitlement to people's money, as if you're entitled to gifts, which I think is completely over the top. And there's something about this response as well. Is it rude that when the first year birthday comes around, I don't want the people who brought me nothing to show up to the party? Which says to me that you assume, or that you think, you believe that people have to buy things for you to be a part of your life, to be a people that you invite into your family, that you invite to these types of events that are in theory quite important and quite momentous, at least for your child. And that's quite sad. That's quite petty. The whole premise of this question comes from a really deeply entitled place that I don't think is very healthy for people. And so it really boggles my mind when I get to comments like this. You still had items that weren't purchased on the register? And she's like, yes, like they were just clothes and not even a lot. So rather than being grateful that they actually bought you some clothes and being quite happy with that, she's like, I should have gotten more. How dare they not get me more? And then there's the next comment also says, no, I don't think that's rude at all. Who shows up to a shower with nothing? Who keeps a grudge for a whole year over not receiving baby shower gifts from a particular person? And that's pretty sad. There are some people who do say that. I don't think you should exclude part of the family from future birthdays because they didn't buy you enough for the shower. They're still family, like it or not. I'm sorry that your expectations weren't met, but don't let that get in the way of your baby meeting and having relationships with his or her father's side. And that kind of encapsulates the foundation of this and the reason behind my response to it as well. Don't let that get in the way of your baby meeting and having relationships with his or her father's side. There are a lot of reasons why people might not be able to buy you gifts for a baby shower. It could be that they don't have money for it. It could be that they didn't understand they didn't understand the etiquette around giving gifts at a baby shower. Maybe it just wasn't that important to them. Maybe what they thought was, hey, we can't afford to get you anything, but we still want to celebrate with you. We still think it's really amazing and awesome that you're going to have a baby, and we want to be a part of that baby's life. And so we will attend and be there and be with you through that journey, but not with items of clothing or other items that you think are worth it. This particular response from the person that wrote the thread, I find actually quite hilarious. This person says, it's not rude at all. I dislike when guests are inconsiderate and cheap, which the way that people respond to these is really something. Putting together a party is work. I'm exactly the same way. I threw my sister a bridal shower in February and spent a good chunk of money. Barely anyone showed up. I was so pissed. I won't be inviting those people who didn't show up to my bridal shower. And again, this is also a little bit petty, not really the healthiest kind of relationship with these types of events that you could possibly have. I agree that putting together a party is work. I get where that's coming from. I understand being a little bit bitter if people don't seem to appreciate it. But people don't owe you anything, and you can't go into it expecting it. And if you have that kind of attitude, then I'm 100% sure that it manifests itself when you interact with those people, that they notice it and they feel it, and that energy comes out. And I'm very sure that that's part of why they might not be responding to you the way that you think they should. And then the OP replies, exactly, the place I rented would cost $450 plus all the food and drinks I had to buy and the decorations. Like, I'm gonna expect something out of everybody. Yikes. Not a very good look. I don't think this is healthy, and I don't think this is good. And if I were you, I would probably reassess where my priorities are in terms of relationships with people and what the purpose of a baby shower should be. And maybe you should take things a little bit easy on the baby registry so you can actually afford all of the things that you think your baby needs, rather than relying on other people to buy them for you. And now we come to settling a debate about kids being forced to hug their grandparents. This thread actually starts from a really interesting place, which is probably not where I would have started this from, but it's quite an interesting point for other people who would see the same pattern. So today I saw a post on social media regarding how millennials grew up as a generation being held responsible for their parents and others' emotions, and thus they have a higher rate of depression and anxiety. Now, I'm not sure if there's actual studies to back this up, but I do see some truth to it. Anyways, this sparked a heated debate with my husband on how we raise our little one. LO is short for little one. Basically, what I said was that I don't want him to grow up thinking that he needs to put himself in uncomfortable positions to make others happy. He needs to be respectful and should take others' emotions into account, but he shouldn't sacrifice his own mental well-being just to make others happy. I then gave the example of the last time my mother-in-law came. She asked him for a hug, and he said no and walked away. My mother-in-law proceeded to fake sob and say that he made her sad because she wanted a hug, and continued asking him for a hug and crying until he gave her one. They were leaving soon, so I bit my tongue, but I really don't agree with this type of manipulation and will say something next time. DH, her husband, said that we need to teach him to be respectful, and part of that entails hugging people. Maybe not friends, but at least parents and grandparents. I disagree. If he's not comfortable or doesn't want to give hugs goodbye, he can still be respectful and say goodbye in a manner that doesn't compromise his comfort. He thinks a child should be made to give hugs to family regardless of whether they want to, because it's polite. I disagree. What are your thoughts? This is actually a really interesting debate because I think that the answer is quite clear. And I don't know if this comes from the whole millennial generation thing. Maybe some aspect of it does. But I do think that that's probably more to do with previous generations being a little bit more authoritarian in terms of how children were raised. And the perspective that kids are kind of like they're owned by their parents. So they're not separate individual human beings who have their own desires, wishes, boundaries, physical space. I think that this is probably a new way of interacting with children and seeing it. However, irrespective of all of that, the way that her mother-in-law in this situation went about this is kind of gross. There's something a little bit, it's emotional blackmail, essentially, is what it comes down to. And you can imagine if she were trying to convince the child to do anything else under the same circumstances, or this idea of like forcing physical affection on a child by fake sobbing and trying to blackmail him into it by making him feel bad for you is really not good. And I'm a little bit shocked that her husband in this situation says, no, we need to teach the child to be respectful. There is some aspect of this, and a lot of people in the comments actually go into this in terms of bodily autonomy, not forcing your kids to give hugs to anyone, sexual assault, and where the boundaries, like how are kids taught to stay quiet when their physical boundaries are being overstepped. And part of that comes from the same kind of aspect of, hey, as a child, you don't have the right to say no. When you don't want to hug someone, if you don't want to kiss someone, whether it's your parents, your grandparents, their friends, your aunts, uncles, etc. It doesn't matter who it is. But as a child, if you have the right to say no, and parents should encourage that in their kids and should teach them that boundary in their kids as well. And now we come to, am I being too hard on my stepson? My husband says I'm being too hard on my 14-year-old stepson and I need to be more positive. But I literally cannot even understand why he does the majority of the things that are upsetting me. Stuff like washing his hair in the sink instead of taking a shower, wearing dirty clothes dug out of the laundry when he has plenty of clean ones, hanging things from an electric cable literally coming out of the fuse box, failing because he doesn't want to take notes in class. Are these just teenage things I forgot I did? Boy stuff? Am I a crazy pregnant woman? My husband says my behavior is driving him, the son, away because I don't give him anything positive, but I don't feel that way. I try my hardest to be there when he needs me. Left work to pick him up when kids were picking on him at school last week. I showed him how to use product on his curls, things a mum would do. I'm just beside myself. He's so close to driving age and has so little common sense. How do I contain my annoyance and anger, but still address the actions? I don't want to be a mean mum. The funniest thing about this one is that the things that are making her angry are completely unreasonable. So things like washing his hair in the sink instead of taking a shower. Of course, taking a shower takes considerably longer than washing your hair in the sink. Those are two separate things. It makes sense that he would choose one instead of the other if he wants to. Wearing dirty clothes dug out of the laundry when he has plenty of clean ones. Also happen, like I do this sometimes if my favorite outfit that I really want to wear is in the laundry and I really want to wear it, then I'm still going to wear it. It's a pretty normal behavior. Hanging things from an electric cable literally coming out of the fuse box. This one to me is actually more of a parent problem than a child problem. Maybe you should fix the electric cable that's coming out of the fuse box instead of leaving it there as a hazard and then getting annoyed at your child for not caring about it being a hazard. Failing because he doesn't want to take notes in class. That one sounds like more of a deeper relationship, a deeper conversation that you can have with him. Because yes, it's a pretty normal behavior. I'm not surprised that a teenage boy would not want to take notes in class, but maybe that is a skill that you can teach him and maybe you can convince him that it's worth his time. I say this as someone with zero experience raising teenage boys or in general interacting with teenage boys outside of the context of my school life, pretty much. So I've had zero contact with teenage boys, but I still believe that all of the things that she mentions here are completely unreasonable, and I don't actually get why she's so angry at them. And what's really sad about this, in the way that she describes it, husband says my behavior is driving him away because I don't give him anything positive, but I don't feel that way. There is something here where she got feedback from her husband who said, hey, I'm not really happy with how you're approaching this, or at least I think that there are some things that you could do that would improve this. And instead of taking that on board, she's like, and completely dismisses it. Instead, she comes to a forum and to see if she can bring other women onto her side, or if what other women say, because their perspective is a little bit more reliable to her, or feels more reliable to her than her husband's, which is not a good look either. And then the next thing that she says that also is really not a good look. I try my hardest to be there when he needs me, which is great. That's awesome. She should continue to do that. I left work to pick him up when kids were picking on him at school last week. I showed him how to use product on his curls, as if these are things that he should be grateful for, as if these are clear signs that she's a great parent and that her annoyance is justified. Because, well, some of the time I'm really nice to him, therefore I can have these totally unreasonable expectations. And so my feedback to this mom would be to work on her anger, and maybe to try and understand where her anger is coming from, why she's being so annoyed, why it manifests itself in this, why it comes out in this way towards her stepson, and to what extent is there here an additional complication by the fact that this is a stepson and not her biological son, because those types of relationships are also even more complicated. The great thing is that quite a lot of people in the comments do actually call her out on it and tell her, hey, maybe you're being a little bit unreasonable here. And then there is this one other example from someone else, which I thought was really interesting. It says, I'm having these issues, but on the other side of things, my husband doesn't really understand what's normal or not for my 11-year-old boy, and he needs to be more patient. He's a straight A student, captain of the football team, amazing big brother to our 1-year-old. That said, he has attitude at home, throws his backpack and shoes in a corner when he gets in, leaves wet towels on the floor, etc., etc. All normal things, but drive my husband insane. It's a work in progress. I tell him to use more positive reinforcement instead of just picking on things like, for example, awesome job showering on time, don't forget the towel next time, or whatever. Just something positive. And this one I also find quite funny, because these are behaviors that are pretty minor in terms of leaving wet towels on the floor, throwing his backpack in a corner. Like, none of these are things that I think are so major for people to get so angry about. But I guess that's part of parenting. Sometimes you live with people who do things that are not exactly the way that you would do them, and that's not good for anyone. And so all of you need just a little bit more calm and a little bit more happiness in your lives, a little bit more, or a deeper ability to just let things go. Letting things go is a good skill. And so we come to the final thread for today. This one's titled Personal, Possibly Stupid Question. Before my current boyfriend, or father of my baby, my last partner gave me an STD, chlamydia, which I took medication for and have been completely clear for since. Fast forward to the father of my baby, there's no reason to think I would have had to tell him. I'm worried that on my first ultrasound, where they ask health history questions, they would bring that up in front of him, like the doctor would ask me if I ever had an STD or something. I'm super embarrassed, even though it's a common thing. I just don't want to talk to anyone about it and get called out in front of my boyfriend on an exciting day. Will they ask about this or bring it up? I have no STDs now. I would never, ever hide that from my partner, which is great. I'm really happy for that. This thread is interesting because there is an underlying sense of shame here with regards to having had chlamydia. And that's the part that I really want to explore. There's one aspect of this, and a lot of the people do say this as well, where you can argue, and it's fair enough to argue, that your boyfriend is not entitled to your private medical information. You do not have to tell him about your previous health history. And this is true, and this is fair enough. There's no sense of entitlement here. I think that is not where I would come at this question from. Let's instead say, what does it say about your relationship that you are uncomfortable sharing things like this with him? Now, some aspect of it is a general health aspect. And health topics in general, I would say, like if you have a really successful, great relationship where you're very open with each other and you're very intimate and you don't have secrets, then you would be able to share private health care information with your partner, and he would be on your side and helpful to you, and it's a supportive partner during that process. What complicates this is that it's an STD. And so I think that this is coming more from this place of not wanting your current boyfriend to be faced with the reality of you having had previous sexual relationships in the past. And that, I think, is fair enough. what I also find really interesting in terms of how she phrases this, I'm super embarrassed, even though it's a common thing. And that's kind of sad. So there's a certain amount of lack of self-awareness, I guess, in terms of why she's embarrassed by it, because she thinks that, hey, everyone gets STDs, it's a pretty normal thing. Maybe you are not that proud of your previous history in terms of how many sexual partners you had, or the way your previous relationships played out, and that's where this sense of shame is coming from. It's fair enough not to tell him. A lot of people will say you can lie because they test you for chlamydia during your pregnancy anyway, so it's not a big deal. Probably not good to do as a rule, right? If you can avoid lying to your partners about things, then it's probably good to avoid lying to them. And I think all of these moments where you have a signal in your relationship that says, nah, I really want to hide this, that's probably a signal that you should really pay attention to, because it's a red flag. It's much better to be honest with your partner as much as possible than it is to try and hide things, even if you think it's going to be awkward, and even if you think it's uncomfortable, and even if they don't have a right to that information anyway. That's all for today. Thank you all for listening, and see you next time.